I'm Arif McComb, and you saw me, my lovely voice up there on the screen talking about the distance classrooms. And this is Linda Childs.
Hi, I'm from Global St. Louis. So our facility is actually located in St. Louis in Town and Country. It's in West County. Oh, okay. We have a definition of distance education, and you can read that for yourself. We focus on teaching methods and technology, and how do we create and provide learning and assist you in doing that, in reaching your students that are not necessarily in the classroom, or that can't be in the classroom. Okay, you saw art in front of the green screen, so the perspective here is from the control room. So down at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a video switcher, a lot of buttons, a lot of screens. That's where we run your class from in our full production classrooms. We pull in all the audio and all the video from all the locations and all the students wherever they may be, and we control all that. So you'll see all the screens and all the equipment. Behind that, in front of the green screen, you'll see the instructor. That's a chroma key wall. So if you're familiar with the weatherman, you've watched them do weather in front of a wall and make gesture. It actually allows you to interact with your content, and the students will see you superimposed over that green screen and the students in the classroom. So we have a one-way window in most of our rooms so that we can see it in the classroom. We assist you with any issues that you may have or help that you may need, getting everything up and running. In the classroom, we have document cameras, we have a Wacom tablet that you can write on, so you can annotate, you can use OneNote to take notes, save it, and Paul does this really well. Save it to a PDF and then post it on Canvas or email it out to your students. Anything else that you can think? And we record everything and we post it online so your distant students have access.
And this is not the only kind of distance classroom that we have on campus. We have some new rooms this semester that are called modified spaces. They don't have the green screen in them. They do, most of them have the Wacom monitor so you can still write on your slides. We connect with the students live for Zoom recordings. We also record with Panopto in those classrooms. We have a control room connected to these classrooms. We also have a person that's live producing your class at their desk, so they can virtually log into your computer and make sure that everything's set up, and then they're there if you have a problem, just like in the main classrooms.
So how many instructors in here have taught in a distance classroom? You can kind of look around in a distance room at some point or another. So, okay, so several of you have. One of the things we wanted to do today is the reason we started out talking about the definition of a distance education, and we wanted to talk about a distance room, is we want to kind of set the scene for what we're talking about when we talk about engagement with students at a distance. And that is something that I think we all work together to come up with good solutions and best practices, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today as we work through some of these issues together. Because more and more our students are coming to us at a distance. They're joining. That seems to be the growing trend right now, and so we need to figure out how best to make this a good, rich learning environment. So one of the things we want to do is do some roundtable discussion, because everybody has to, as we say, you can't just sit and get, you got to work for it a little bit. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to ask 3 questions, and then we're going to give you a chance to work together in your teams, and then we're going to share back out to the bigger group. So there's going to be a little bit of time where we just are working in groups. So here are the questions. They're also on the tables as well in the middle, so help yourselves to those. We're going to give you a few minutes to talk, and then we're going to come back and share. So be prepared to share. I will call on everybody. You know.
So we discussed, and for any who are familiar, at a lot of universities, online learning is taught in modules that are often pre-recorded. Students work at their own pace. There's not necessarily a classroom presence for them, and that's one of the real advantages. I mentioned I do recruiting for a lot of the distance students that come into my program, and I make sure to really clarify those differences, that they have that option for live participation as well as asynchronous. We have a classroom presence. Our distance is not what they're used to when they hear online. They're not just going to be getting handed a bunch of slides and some pre-recorded video from 10 years ago. They're going to be getting an actual chance to participate and be a part of that class actively. And I make sure that they know that distinction. I found that makes a big difference from a recruitment perspective, at least.
We were discussing the fact, very similar, that a lot of online classes traditionally are, you're working just in a vacuum, you're working at your own pace. The interaction that you have with colleagues is simply via text and chat. And our distance program here allows students to log in synchronously and participate with their colleagues and other learners wherever they may be.
So are the needs of distance students different from students attending face-to-face? How so? If so, how?
Well, we talked about the communication does seem to be more challenging and maybe not as convenient as just being able to talk to someone face-to-face. You can communicate through emails, but you don't always get the tone and the body language and the voice when you do that. So we talked about that. One possible remedy might be to use the media recorder and Canvas and give a video feedback on something. It's very easy. You don't have to know anything about video production. Just click play and record. Click record and stop and play. So that's one remedy. But we did talk about things that are hands-on, a little more difficult to replicate when other people are not there with the things that you have in the classroom. And things like weather jokes just don't make sense if people are far away.
Like today.
Like today, yes. Of course, time zone changes or differences are often a barrier where they cannot attend live to the distance classrooms. So they're watching a recording and might not be able to interact.
So our group just initially got to that question and we didn't get fully involved, but one of the things beside what Julie had said in their group was the engagement, so that student-to-student engagement in the classroom is a lot easier to do than have those distant students because they're not there. And you may have one in Kansas City and one in St. Louis, and they can't turn to each other and explain the problem. So that's one of the disadvantages or differences. So, anybody have anything else?
We were talking about
Jim had.
Zoom. We use Zoom. We moved from WebEx to Zoom for the classes, and Zoom now has breakout sessions where you can, during class, people are behind me, also let your students break out into breakout rooms, and we have a professor who's working with this now. So you can, during class, set them up into different breakout sessions, and the professor can drop into any of those sessions that he would like to, and then he can pull it back to the class. So that's something that's coming up that I'm really excited about.
So, can I ask a question? Anybody on it? What technology do the students have available that would mimic something like in a live classroom? They have a worksheet and they're sitting and drawing and calculating together on a piece of paper. That's your software. Do the students have like tablets they can write on and share that with the breakout group, or?
The distance students?
Yes.
They may or may not.
So that's not a feature that they have to have.
There's,
But most of them have phone, right? I mean, if they do it, can they take a picture and put it in the room?
they can. They can also, we have the capacity in the Zoom software to share screens. So the professor can stop sharing his screen and the student can share what they're doing so they can see that. Some students may have the option to draw with a pen or draw with a mouse or write. It just depends on what they have available to them. So you can use any combination of whatever they have to get that material from them to the classroom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
The very first comment that was made about that question at our table, Vinkat said, well, many of our distance students have full-time jobs and other non-job responsibilities and often can't be here in real life or, at the same time synchronously. Whereas many of our on-campus students, they're right there, and in many cases, their full-time job is to be here as a student. And that is a huge difference that we as faculty must really keep in mind.
So then how do you connect with them when they may not be live in class?
Think about that, and we'll come back to it with our panelists here in a little bit. So that's something we want to kind of hit on. And so that was, I guess that's the last one. How do you connect with students? I gotta remember to read my question. So how can you connect with the students? One of the suggestions at our table, I'm not skipping our table, I'm just walking around, so. Our table, one of the suggestions talked about if the student is close and at any time could come to the class, maybe and share about what they do in their daily job so that they can maybe connect to the students in a different way. Not everybody can do that because we've got people scattered everywhere, but possibly if they're close, they may be able to come for one session to share a little bit about what they do.
They can also join.
I'm coming.
Those distance students who are not live on class could join a discussion board in Canvas to view their items. If they are live, they are joining the Zoom meeting, then they can share desktop, as Linda said, or actually share whatever they have drawn or done in order to show what is being done during class.
So I know we've got lots more discussion, but I want to make sure we get to our panelists because we have 4 instructors with us today.
And we're going to ask them, we're going to pepper them with questions, and they're going to share some of their experiences. They've all had opportunities to teach in a distance room. They've had struggles and they've overcome those, so we want to let you hear from them as much as we possibly can. So I'm going to start off with kind of an interesting question here. What's the easiest thing about teaching distance students?
Yeah. Oh wow, you're going to start with me. Easiest thing. You go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to say this because honestly, the easiest thing for me is that we have a great video communications staff. I mean, it's fabulous. Okay, so if you have any concerns, they always have them set up. They're there, they're on time, and get things done. So it's a really smooth production, and you can concentrate on the material you're trying to deliver and connecting with the students.
No, you're good. I'll go ahead with that. But I agree that it's, if there are ever any technical issues, they're right there. They help. If they can't figure it out right away, they get it figured out by the next class period. So yeah, I do agree that is definitely well run. That part of it is very well run.
I have to echo that as well. I was going to say the main thing is that I come to my class and basically all I have to do is put on a microphone and they take care of everything else. And it's just very easy and seamless. The other thing I think that may be kind of a strange thing that I really like about teaching distance classes is that I really like using the Wacom because I like to mix just some definitions that I'll put up that I don't want to have to write by hand, but I want to have them to be just there so they can see those and I can discuss them. But I also like to work out a lot of problems by hand because I teach a statistics class. I like to do examples, so I can really easily mix the text that I put with handwritten notes, and I really like that with the Wacoms that I don't always get in my regular classrooms.
Okay, so now I'm going to flip the question around. And we'll start with Nathan. So since you get to answer the last one.
Oh, well, what's the most difficult thing?
There you go.
Oh, well, I think it does take more work, and I think you just have to be prepared for that. I enjoy it, but I challenge myself to put in more effort to connect and engage with those students because they're not present in the classroom. And as we kind of left off and talking about, you really have to make sure that they feel like they're part of the class. And I find at times that's one of the greatest challenges of teaching distance. So.
Anybody else want to answer that, or I can go on? It kind of segues into the next question. Anybody else want to? Yes?
Can I ask a question? Sure. I could ask it really loud.
I know you
classroom voice. Do any of you teach distance classes with no in-class students?
Yep.
Oh.
Go ahead.
That would be a huge challenge to me because I feed my energy off of the students sitting in front of me, and whether they understand or not. There's a blank look that we all know. And so how do you overcome that?
Well, first of all, it's very common that I don't have, since I'm teaching from St. Louis, I don't have anybody live there. That's extremely rare. I usually do have someone on campus, so maybe I've not had the zero situation where there's absolutely no feedback, if that's what you're after. But even with the good video technology, it's still not the same as being this close and seeing expressions on face, that type of thing. The first semester, it was very hard for me, but I've gotten more used to it. And I also teach, a live classroom at Washington University, so I have both experiences, and it is easier to connect in person. Hopefully I can to get that feedback, but really making sure that, again, for me, the folks that are here on campus that are there live, that they know that I really want them to ask questions, to bring up a topic or challenge, or let's tailor this to where we need to go. Another thing that I try to do is teach my very first session here on campus, so I make that human connection with the students, even though I may not get here the rest of the semester, at least once they've done that.
So I would like to add to in terms of the issues, definitely connecting with the students is an issue. Another thing that I found that is a problem is just communicating. Communicating what my expectations are. It takes longer in a distance classroom, I found. It also, I have more issues of misunderstanding. So particularly if I have students who maybe they have a different culture, so we may be speaking English, but there may be different dialects or whatever, so it's maybe harder to communicate, but they're misunderstanding me more often than if they're in the classroom, and the same is true if they ask a question where the communication is a little harder. So I do find that there are things that I do to try to reduce the communication issues.
So what are some of those?
Well, I try to communicate everything in multiple ways. So I say it in class, I write it in my slides, but I also, on things that are, for instance, I have several assignments in one particular class. I have several assignments that they have to do in different ways. So I can make a video that describes what the assignments, that post that on the home page, or I can just do a PowerPoint slide that's just talking about what I want them to do for that assignment and have multiple ones there. It has reduced. I used to track the number of communication issues. I think that's part of what makes it harder because you spend more time answering emails, you spend more time at that. My number of communication issues went down when I started making sure, so I do at least 3 ways that I communicate things that I'm trying to get across to them, and that helps reduce that communication issue.
So what about, Dana, what do you do to connect with students?
Yeah, I think it kind of echoes what everyone else has said. I think that in general, because I do email a lot more with them, and just being able to, I can explain something to someone in person, kind of there's a natural flow, whereas in the email communication, I do spend a lot more time and try to make sure I carefully say exactly what I'm trying to convey, and that just takes more time.
I can chime in and say, this may sound silly, but I say hello. I make sure to specifically say hello to the distance students that are logging in synchronous and live. And not just in general, I will address them by name. Like, oh, hey Shaylin, it's nice to see you tonight. I'm glad you joined us. I can't see him. He's not sharing his screen. That's fine, but he knows. Or I had a student, Andy, the other semester. I'd ask Andy a question. I'd see that he was in and I'd ask a question, and it's okay to wait for a response because he's gonna type something. Or maybe he stepped away for a minute. And that's okay to kind of say, oh, I guess Andy stepped away. That's fine, we'll keep going. But to try to reach out and make sure that you make that extra effort. I think emails are certainly another one, right? Is that I send an introductory email to all of my distance students, specifically, that I wouldn't to my on-campus students because I've met them and we went over the syllabus. And it's just as simple as, I know I covered the syllabus and we talked about this and this in class. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I want you to know. Tell me about yourself in an introductory email. And that's a great way to just at least let them know, hey, I see you. I know you're in my class and I'm paying attention to you just like I am to these on-campus students, even if you're not sitting physically in the classroom.
Hello. My question is about the different sort of modes of communication and whether the distance students and the on-campus students can feel like the same group or different groups. And what's been happening, I have a class where it's about 2/3 distance students, and I do a lot of discussions in class, and they're actually doing a great job with that. However, the distance students are almost exclusively using chat, and of course the on-campus students are vocalizing. So what happens is I ask the question, and the 5 of us in the room talk a little bit, and then we're like, oh, what's been going on in the chat? Or we start talking and someone says something on the chat and then it just cuts it off. And I feel that distance students are a little bit reluctant unless they're asked to present or asked a question directly to come across with an oral comment or with a video chat. So I was just wondering different techniques to make sure that that discussion is integrated. I find it very hard to keep the discussion flow going when there's sort of this asynchronous, we need to pause and wait for, because someone just wrote something or someone's responding to something. And also the chat feature, I already have discussion posts that people do throughout the week. So we already have plenty of text chat going on. So sort of a multi-part question.
I think there's a difference in teaching style depending on the content and material. So I had less of a problem, I found, when I was teaching material that required more lecture. And so I'm sorry to say that was an adaptation I had to really make to push myself to move away from, I know at the graduate level in psychology, we commonly teach in what's a seminar style. Everyone reads the articles, comes to class, and then we have a discussion about them and sort of free flow ideas and questions to really, hit at different topics. I had to transition away from that to a lecture presentation style, which incorporates smaller discussions that can bridge that gap more easily. And I found my students appreciated that more because they were able to need it. I'm able to ask questions ahead of time and then address those questions in class and in my lectures. But you're right, that's something that's not necessarily seamless. And even when they will live chat, you can't have them speaking over each other, right? Which you get oftentimes in class discussions. I see, especially my undergrads, where they'll erupt into 10 side conversations naturally. But that's just not as easy to do with distance. So I'll be honest and say there that it was a stylistic change for me in the way I approached and taught the course. And I found benefits from that. But I did have to walk away from that sort of discussion-focused class ideology.
I would say that I agree that it does affect the flow of the class. I have had classes where a majority of the distance students, because I had very large distance sections, some of them would chat in and some of them would speak. I try to encourage them to speak in class rather than chat in, because it's hard for me to keep up with the chat. And sometimes it blows up and it's just going, and I'm trying to look at one and somebody adds something in, so it spins it. So I do try to get them to talk in class, because I ask them questions. I'll say, okay, what about who? And I look to see, I call them out by name, and that helps spur that discussion. You do have to realize that it's better now. It used to be quite a lag. There was a little bit of a lag, and so it was harder to get that spontaneous discussion going. Another thing that I do, I didn't know Zoom did the breakout sessions. I've been trying breakout sessions forever. They didn't work very well in WebEx. One of the things I do is I have my teams have to, I pose questions that leads into some of the discussion in class. They have to come to a consensus of an answer as a team before class, and I pull that up in class at the very beginning so that they have a chance to get their input into it, but I'm not getting everybody's input. I'm getting a consensus of their team's input, and so it takes less time to do that. But I do think the live, that they speak out, I encourage them to do that rather than chat in. I think that because the in-class students then get to know their voice, they know who's talking, they feel more of a part of it. If they're just chatting in, it's more disconnected to me.
So I have a question that relates to that, because all the discussion so far has been in class, during that synchronous class. How many of you are using some of the other things that we offer, such as Voicethread, or using the discussion boards and allowing students to post video and audio for their discussion board prompt answers?
I've used those. I've used Voicethread. I found actually a lot of the students that wanted to chat in class rather than speak out wanted to go on Voicethread and chat too. And so I actually got pushback when I said, no, I want to see your beautiful smiling faces. You need to post a video. And you have to have a webcam for class. And even some of the on-campus students, you know, I don't want to share my video. I don't want these people to see what's in my house. Okay. I didn't realize that was going to be a deal breaker. Hang a curtain behind you. But I actually got some really negative feedback from students and some complaints in response to requiring a video presence. They preferred the chat, a lot of them at least. They pushed back and just wanted to comment that way. So, you know, for me that wasn't a battle that I was going to pick with them, and I let it go.
So what about when the student isn't synchronous though?
Well, I do online discussion that we do a discussion in class, because one class is a discussion-based class. So we do some discussion in class, but I either post a question that we didn't cover in class, or leave it open-ended for something they thought that didn't come. And I expect the in-class and whoever is attending live and whoever is attending it asynchronously to both participate. I have more requirement for those who were not in class, so they have to reply to more posts. So that's how I try to incorporate them in there. And then I bring that, if there's something that was really important or I thought was really key, I would bring that back into class the next time and try to draw that person into the classroom, even though they're on the West Coast or in India or wherever and they're not attending live.
One thing that I have done for my students outside of class is to have some online office hours. Now, it seems a little bit variable. Like some semesters, the students don't really need that, and so I don't do that. But then there have been a couple semesters that's been really successful. That the students, and I try to set it up at a time that's usually after 5 p.m. because since a lot of them are working and it may not be 5 p.m. for them either. So I try to find a time that works for them. So I've had a couple semesters that's been really helpful for them as well.
Just one other thing that I've done is I'll have problem sessions, which I know a lot of people do, but I'll do this. I guess it would be in Zoom now, that students can join in too. So.
Is there a difference in terms of personal relationship between you and your students? for on-campus students versus distance students? Like after class, after the semester, when you see them on campus in the library, in Cameron Center. The second one is, has any of your distance students asked you for a recommendation letter?
I'll jump in on the second one for sure. I have a large number of my distance students that ask me to be a reference for them. And, you know, of course, I need to make sure I have had some connection with them to have, you know, good validity for that reference. But that has worked quite a bit. And since I'm not on campus at all, I don't have, I mean, here, you know, in this MS&T program, I don't have that other opportunity.
I'm perfectly happy to answer the first part and say yes and no. Some of my distance students, no, I don't know as well. But I had one that I knew was pregnant and had contacted, and you know, we exchanged, because I recently had a child myself. Okay, we exchanged baby pictures and we've talked, and you know, the student graduated. And I went and got the programs because they weren't able to make it to campus. I got a stack of programs that have their name in them and had those mailed to her so that she could share with her family and such. And we've invited them to go to things like conferences and stuff as graduate students. And I've met several of our graduate students when we had meet and greet activities in the St. Louis area. And I said, well, okay, you're in St. Louis, come on out. It's one evening and this is a chance to meet in person and connect with us. Or as well as we had some that went to national conferences. We offer the same sort of like funding and support opportunities for our distance students as we do for on-campus. And we encourage them to attend those because it's a professional conference. They're getting the same degree. And so I found that that was a great opportunity to connect. So it did require more work, you know, really reaching out and trying to get to know them, because you don't have those casual after-class encounters. You have to sort of make those opportunities happen or push a little harder without invading their privacy. And so for those of my distance students that, you know, aren't particularly social and chiming back and asking questions, I leave them their privacy. I don't push too hard. But for those that have reached out and engaged, absolutely. And I have no hesitation writing them a letter of reference.
Well, I'm just going to follow up with that. I would say for me, there is definitely a difference, but that difference is smaller now. When I first started, I didn't know different ways to engage them as much. So one of the things that I do to kind of start that conversation is I have them post a bio about themselves. So tell me something interesting about yourself, or something that kind of gets that conversation. And even the ones that don't talk as much in class or don't attend live, I still have some information about them. I have a way to connect to them, and I try to reach out to them about that. But I didn't do that as well when I first started it. Now I feel like the difference is a lot less than what it used to be.
My question relates to connections between students in your class. It may not be applicable to all classes. It may be applicable to more advanced classes or maybe smaller classes. But let's say that you have a class with different student demographics, different maturity levels. Some are professional students out there working, some of them are full-time students. So apart from team-based projects where groups of people are lumped together and sort of forced to work together, what other types of things do you practice or should we be practicing to encourage more connections between students in our class, to encourage that cohort feeling, especially if you go through some of the leadership-type classes, coming out, networking is a very big benefit. Any ideas?
Okay.
Okay, leverage the experience those students have. So I guess for me it's easier with industrial organizational psychology, psychology applied to the workplace. Well, you all have jobs. Oh no, wait, some of you are on-campus students that have never been anything other than students. You've had maybe a part-time job. Hey, these distance students, they have a full-time job. Learn from them. And I try to encourage them to bring in those experiences, share those experiences, and those can be on discussion boards, or it can be chiming in class. I love the bio idea, and I think that that would help with some of those kinds of things, because I'll be able to better reach out and say, hey, you work at so-and-so, can you tell us about the leadership there and your experience with that? But for me, it's encouraging them to share their experiences and say that that's part of the value of having older, non-traditional students. Maybe non-traditional is the better word. Non-traditional students in the class is they have these wonderful experiences that our traditional students don't. And that can bring so much to the classroom if you get them to open up and share it. Talk about those experiences when they would have used this, or how things really happen, rather than how they should happen. Because let's be honest, things don't always go as they should in the workplace, right? Or anywhere for that matter.
So I would say I forced some of that. You talked about the team projects. I build teams in one particular class where it's more discussion based. I have large teams, and I make large teams because I'm trying to make them realize how hard it is to work on teams virtually, because I teach global project management. But so not only do they do team projects together, and I always match them with somebody in class. Most of my students are distance. But I also have them do regular team building exercises, and I state that one of the purposes of that is for those with more experience to teach the ones with less experience. So that's one of my goals for that, and to get to know the team members. So for this, I've been using GroupMe, and they have a GroupMe chat room that they have to talk about, and they're sharing baby pictures, they're doing all kinds of stuff. So the team gets to know each other, because before every class time, they have to do an activity together. And so they do learn from each other. Some of them, again, have a wealth of knowledge. I've got one student this semester who's got a lot of experience. So the people on that team are learning from that.
I can build on that and say I've seen some of the cohorts in our program have those GroupMe channels, and they continue to use them even after the classes. And it's just sort of a, hey, you're in this program, be part of this GroupMe, and I can text the whole group, and they can all share and all those things. And I think that really helped with the cohort building. They started a Facebook, group site where and then they're now inviting newer students in the program to come join their Facebook. I'm not invited to that page yet. It's probably for the better. Probably for the better. but they started that, and I think it's things like GroupMe that push them in that direction, and then they'll take it from there. They want to be friendly with each other. They may just not know that right off.
So we have time for one more question for our panelists. Anybody? So what would be your advice to somebody who maybe has not taught before? What would be the first step they need to take? What would be your advice?
Well, just a thought, because you do have to try to connect with the student in advance, particularly the distance and the asynchronous student. So to the extent that you have your syllabus, class requirements, expectations posted out, recording the introduction video that the VCC will do with you, that helps them get to know you and your background and experience a little bit better, so that they can connect that way. So that's one thing that I think really helps. I should have done that the first time I taught, but now I have it set up for all my classes, and I wish I would have done that the first time.
And I think just continually thinking of ways that you can try to engage the distance students. I mean, I think when I first jumped into it, I didn't have I still don't have large distance sections, but they are growing. But I just started with 1 or 2 students, and I think that now, after having taught for a while, I have new ideas of ways that I can, instead of kind of thinking of things as they go along, just try to, at the beginning, try to think of those things beforehand, so that the distance students, from the beginning, before class ever starts, already feel as if they're welcome and a part of your class.
I would say that a lot of times for a graduate course, we like to have it to be pretty flexible in terms of the schedule. I found that the distance students don't really like it to be flexible. They want to know in advance what's due, when things are happening, because they work, they travel, it's hard for them. So I think having it clearly laid out helps them. I think having some flexibility because they are traveling and understanding the fact that they have a different schedule than the in-class students, I think that goes a long way. If you show that willingness to be flexible with them, it really goes a long way with them because they're juggling a lot and it's hard. I've taken classes and tried to work full time and it's hard to juggle that. So having some understanding and flexibility with that, I would add in as well.
I think that's an excellent point. I was actually going to say flexibility, but from an instructor's point of view, I was thinking more, I could tell you more things I've tried that didn't work than I could that did. But when, you know, I've been open to trying new things. And I think going into the classroom and saying, well, let's try Voicethread. And I'm going to say, you have to have a camera, and we're going to do this, and we're going to try it. And, you know, when someone got mad at me, okay, I was willing to change and adjust. But I've adjusted my style, I've adjusted my lectures. I've adjusted a lot of things, my exams and my assessment practices in my class. All of them, because I just try things, see what works, see what doesn't, and go from there. But that willingness on my part to try new things, I think has been very helpful for me. And it's helped me to work with ed tech and say, hey, give me suggestions, come to things like this and tell me what I can do differently. Even if it doesn't work, at least it's something to try.
And yeah, you don't have to do all of this on your own. I think that's a good point because ed tech has been wonderful with coming up with different ideas and try this and see how it works. So, yeah.
Yeah, ed tech's a great resource. And, you know, I'd like to try more things. Sometimes you don't find that time for it, but the one thing I'm really glad you brought up, the instructor flexibility, because I was probably too rigid at the beginning. You know, thankfully, you know, where I was working full time, I could talk to a lot of peer engineers who are taking distance classes, whether in this program or elsewhere, about kind of their good and bad experiences. And you do really have to trust them, and you have to be more flexible. And maybe that doesn't work for everybody, but I know I've gotten a lot more flexible as I've gone along than I was the first time I taught distance class.
So thank you, panelists. We appreciate your We kind of came up with this list hoping that it would help you, but I think our panelists and other people in the room have come up with some things you might want to add to this list. We categorized them a little bit because our first reaction was, well, wouldn't you know, communication is key, but wouldn't you do that in a face-to-face? Yes, but there are some differences. So that's why we came up with this document, because although a lot of these things are true in a face-to-face class and or an online class, they are also there are some differences with distance. So we categorize them a little bit. You'll notice the first category is syllabus. Well, shouldn't any class have a good syllabus, a thorough, detailed syllabus? Yes. So we want to make sure that that syllabus is provided in an online format of some kind, so that, because some people only hand them out as a paper copy in a face-to-face class, so you make sure that's available, and if possible, even ahead of time, so that they know what's expected, and that those expectations are very, very clear. You don't have always that freedom to just tell them in class, so putting everything in writing is key. That's very true of an online course as well. Major projects and due dates, this is something that a lot of people include in their syllabus as well. That's when things are due, a schedule of some kind, that needs to be available as well to your students. So I think Gayla mentioned online office hours or virtual office hours. Again, that could be handy for any class, but with virtual office hours really are a must, I think, in an online or distance environment, so that you are available at other times outside of the class time. And I talked to some people who feel like they've really gotten to know their students better, and some students who are not as likely to come to your office, in a physical office, are more likely to be more comfortable
meeting with you online. They're used to FaceTiming, right? They're used to Skype, they're used to those kinds of tools, and you can do it in so many different ways now that it's really not that hard. So those are some just kind of syllabus reminders. Communication, of course, came up several times today, and establishing how you're going to communicate. What is the way that is your primary mode of communication? I think that's very important. If it is email, then they need to make sure that they're checking that. You need to, ensure that they are checking that email. If you use announcements as a feature in Canvas, you want to make sure that they have not turned that feature off. Yes?
When you said make sure, how do we do that? How do I make sure the students read their email or read their email?
You cannot make sure that they read it. But you can put things in writing, and at least you've done that, and they can't say you didn't tell them if it's in writing. And they've all seen that by logging into a common space. So that way that you want to use the most is what you want to make sure that if you're going to post things in a website or in an online learning management system, you want to make sure that they know how often they need to check that. Is it every day? Is it every week? And what form is that going to be in? So and then how often are you going to provide feedback to them when you grade things? You're going to give them how quickly you're going to turn that around. And that's, again, one of those things that's very important in a face-to-face class, but probably more so that written feedback is even more important in this environment. So we've talked a lot about the small group discussions and that there are breakout rooms. That is a feature in Zoom that's really nice to have. And probably some more people will be trying that out. And also, I know, Nathan, you talk about addressing those distant students by name, and a really good way to do that is to just maybe even have a student or someone else monitor a chat window, so that, because it is a lot to think about when you're in front of everybody and all these cameras and monitors in the room, you probably have too much to think about to really even look at the chat. So maybe putting someone else in charge. If you've ever attended a webinar, you'll notice that somebody else is monitoring that chat. You can do the same thing in your classroom. So, course technology. We could talk about this all day. There's all kinds of technology you can use. But knowing what you're going to use and making sure you know how to use it ahead of time is very important. One of the things that comes up with a lot of distance classrooms is the software. If you are teaching a class that teaches how to use software, then how do those students that are not here, that have access to it in a computer lab, how are they going to have access to that software? So one is what we call the VDI, the virtual desktop, and that is something you want to make sure you've set up ahead of time and that there's licensing to do that. And we have a software request program that has some very strict deadlines. So watch for those emails about software requests to make sure, just like you want to make sure that they're in the classroom, you want to make sure that there's a way for your students to access that software. And then I'm going to just we've already talked a lot about the technology, so I just want to skip down to the special considerations, and there are a lot more than this, but please consult us. Please ask us for your help in advance if possible. Maybe you don't know that we can help you, but we're a small team. The instructional services team is very small, but we are in and out of our offices all the time, making appointments with people and helping them with the planning of their course. So, one thing we see a lot is distance classes are often last-minute thoughts, and people sign up for distance, and then there are no distance students in the class. Why does that happen? Why do you think that happens? No distance students in your distance sections, but you have plenty on campus.
Don't advertise.
Right, you don't advertise it. So you really need to mark that or know that there's a need for it before you decide to have a distance section. And yes?
what are some suggestions on how to poll that? How to find out if there is a...
What have some of you done? How do you know that there's a need for distance? Any of the panelists have any thoughts on that? How do you know that you need distance?
I can say ours is at the program level. So it's with the degree, we market regionally, and we're starting to, market more nationally as well. But having an online program was part of what we push from the marketing of the program itself. Then you're offering all the classes and you're saying, okay, well, we have this body of distance students that are coming to take classes. Now we need to make sure there are classes for them to take. And from there, it's just an advising thing, right? Making sure the advisors know this class is available distance, the students can take it. So that's really where we pull our distance students in, is at the program level.
Okay, good point. Anybody else?
So Global Learning also has a marketing group that can help with distance, with marketing if we know in advance to get stuff ready. So it's another one of those, really working with your department chair to figure out what, as a department, in terms of programmatically, you want to offer so that we can really do a good job of putting together the marketing materials and get them out to different corporations. We talk with companies all the time. If there's a company that you've worked with that you know might need those types of services, let us know. We'll go work with them and see if we can get a cohort of students. But it is about offering more than one course because they need to have that full program. So it's got to be something that we can work with. Some of the things that is also to think about is students that go on co-op or are out for other reasons, that maybe undergraduate, not graduate, but they may be out traveling and they need the course to stay on track to graduate in a reasonable time. That's also something we can look at as well. But just talking with instructional services or global learning is a great place to start with that.
Thank you. That reminded me of something else I noticed on the list was proctoring. That's often a question, is how do I do exams from a distance? And we do have a fairly new proctoring online tool called ProctorU. Malcolm did a nice workshop on that just recently. And he's our go-to person for help with that. Is that correct? Okay, and or any of us can help put you in contact with somebody to get you started, but Malcolm is the person that is probably the person we're going to point to. So that is an online proctoring system that allows people to take a test in front of a webcam, and they have some identifying information they have to show to a person, a live person at ProctorU is on the other end watching them on the webcam. So they have to verify who they are through a few questions, and then they watch them take the exam, and they record it. They record what they're watching. So, and this is 24/7. So they could take an online test at 2 in the morning, and someone from ProctorU will be there watching them take the test. Now you have to plan for that. You can't just do it any time. You do have to set that up and plan for it, but our team can help you do that as well. Another thing is travel. Say you're away, you got bad weather, you can't get back for class. You can use Zoom to still have class. You just might not be in the classroom. And that's another nice thing to do. And then even if it's not a distance class, you can get a pro account for $12 through IT. And it's a very easy tool to use. You can also pre-record using Zoom. And that's a nice way to just post something in your website or in Canvas to have students have class differently that day, but you don't have to cancel it. And guest lectures. I heard some people talking about guest lectures. That could be done via Zoom as well. They could just click on the link and join in. Really all they need is a webcam. And pretty good internet connection. And a microphone. Well, right, or the webcam and the microphone and webcam. Sometimes is okay, but sometimes a headset with a mic is better. Yes, thank you. Anything else? Any questions? I did have one thing I wanted to touch on. We were talking about Voicethread earlier. There is an audio-only feature. So that is an option. And I would also, I really like the fact that Joe brought up about the bios, because one of the first things you might want to do in any class is make sure that their picture is in their profile in Canvas, so that everyone can put a face with a name. And this is really important. I think even if you did Voicethread and they have their profile in their picture, or their picture profile, that's going to show up even with an audio recording, so at least we know who it is. So, and as far as not wanting to be recorded on a webcam, I understand not wanting to push that, because sometimes you just have to fight your battles. But I did want to it just made me think of some classes have touched on this, because having a webcam and using that as a life skill now, how many job interviews are done online with the webcam? And there are things to think about. Yeah, if it looks junky behind you, do something about it. You certainly don't want to have a bar right behind you. And this has happened. In some classes, this has happened where they've done videos and you see all kinds of interesting things behind them. So it's just a good skill to know that you need to clean it up a little bit and look professional and when you make a video. So anything else? Any questions, other considerations? This is, like I said, not everything, but these are some things we thought of that were pretty obvious.
I want to make one more comment, and that is, we've been talking about Zoom, but if it's last minute, there's always Panopto in your Canvas course. And anybody who didn't see the advertising and everything and wanted to know where Integrity went away at the end of the calendar year, and we switched over to Panopto. And if you missed that message and you need to learn how to use it, stop by EdTech, and we'll be happy to help you out with that. But even though it's much more difficult for your students to join live in Panopto, if you realize at 2 o'clock in the morning that, oh my, I have to catch a plane at 10 a.m. and I forgot to do something about class tomorrow or in a few hours, you can always use Panopto to make up for that class. And, because it happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. What Panopto and Zoom both can do is just a screencast. So anything that you do on your computer, they're going to see that, as well as if you choose a thumbnail of your webcam as well. Anything else? Okay, Abby, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Let's give one more round of applause to our wonderful panelists.